welcome to your Iowa Assessment Interpretation video series. This is video 3 out of 4. In this video, we will be discussing the individual performance profile. You will see a copy of that document right here. If you don't have yours out in front of you, go ahead and press pause, get it, and then come right back. What you'll notice, this form is really broken up into two different sections. The upper left-hand corner has a chart, and then down below, the bottom half, also information, and we will tell you a little bit more about each of those two components of the individual performance profile. In the upper left-hand corner, which is where we'll start, this is a blown-up version, so a zoomed-in version there. You'll see off to the left, the column off to the left has your tests. And so reading, written expression, conventions of writing, so on and so forth. The next middle column has a series of 4 columns. Those are representing 4 different kinds of data, 4 different data points that are all about your child's score for that particular testing area. We are going to focus in on 2 of those, NPR and NS. And we'll tell you more about what those are going to mean in just a second. The final column over to the right is just a bar graph, and that represents and that reflects back to the NPR, which is one of the reasons that we're going to unpack that for you. So NPR, National Percentile Ranking. We're going to help you understand what that particular component will be for your son or daughter. One of the easiest ways or the best ways to understand NPR is to know what it's not. It doesn't have anything to do with a traditional classroom assessment. So your son or daughter gets a 59% on a test. That means they got 59% of those items correct. That is not what National Percentile Ranking means. So what is it? It is a comparison of your son or daughter based on their performance on this particular test versus all the other students who took the same test at the same time. So let's get real with some data. Let's say that your son or daughter scored in the 59th national percentile. So they got a 59 for the NPR. That means that they scored better than 59% of the students who took that same test at the same time. So that's only going to be so helpful in the sense that around 50 is going to tell you that that's the national average. That's where, for that particular grade level, that's where kind of the typical, the average student is, which is right on par and right where they should be. However, a way to indicate then maybe if they're above average or below average would be not necessarily NPR, but to then look at the national STAININE, the STAININE. What is that and how does that translate back to the NPR? So let's stick with that 59 national percentile ranking. The STAININE for that particular score is going to give you a clear indication of are they right around the average? Maybe they're a little bit above, maybe a little bit below, and that's going to come through the STAININE. The STAININE is going to use numbers 1 through 9, and that's going to be grouped into whether it's a low range, 1 to 3, whether they're within the average, 4 to 6, or whether they're 7 to 9, which would be above average. And so again, the STAININE is going to be a much more general way of understanding a particular data point based on your child's performance. So let's take a look at both NPR, which is a scale from 1 to 99. It's a point of comparison. It's going to rank your son or daughter in comparison to all the other students who took the same test at the same time, and then how STAININE and coupling those together can help us to interpret and analyze your child's scores. So we go back to that upper left-hand corner and we just take one of the testing areas. Let's call it written expression. So the second one up on the upper left-hand corner. And so we look at the national percentile ranking 71. Once again, that's going to mean that they did better than 71% of the students who took that same test at the same time for written expression. The bar graph over here is going to correlate back to the NPR. And so that 71, what does that really tell us? It's a decent score and it's above a 50, so we can assume it's a little bit above average. But the STAININE is going to more clearly indicate are they within the average range, maybe they're a little bit below average, or maybe they're a little bit above. And so for this particular score, it's a national STAININE of a 6. So to go back to our scheme of looking at STAININE, 1 to 3 is going to indicate below average, 4 to 6 is going to tell us that we're right on where we should be, and then 7 to 9 is going to indicate a score that's above average. If we take a look at just another data point to help you understand as you analyze and interpret your son or daughter's scores, let's go down to computation, which would be underneath our math scores. Computation national percentile ranking for this particular student was a 17, meaning that they did better than 17% of the students who took that same test at the same time for mathematical computation. And so represented over here with our bar graph, you can see that it's right below the 25, so it's correlating back to that 17. But now let's look at the stay-9. How does that relate to whether or not they're a little bit below average, above average, or right on the average? And so we find 17 and we continue over and across and we have a national stay-9 of a 3. Go back to that same setup. 1 to 3 is going to indicate below average, 4 to 6 is average, 7 to 9 above average. So for this particular part of the Iowa assessment, computation, we could say that this is a potential area of weakness based on not only the national percentile ranking but also the stay-9. As you continue to interpret your scores, we can now go to the bottom half of our document and we'll take you through that as well. As you're looking at the strengths and weaknesses for your son or daughter, using national percentile ranking and national stay-9, the way that you can get more detailed information would be to look at the bottom half of the individual performance profile. You'll see that right here. So we'll tell you what you'll see on that bottom half and then how you can use the information there to interpret more detailed information about strengths and weaknesses for your child. So over to the left, yet again, you'll have the list of tests and skills. The middle column is going to have a number of different items and a number of different figures. And so we'll tell you about each of those just very quickly. The first column is going to give you the total number of items for that particular test. So if you look at vocabulary, it had 30 items for that section of the test. The second column is the total number of items that your son or daughter attempted for that particular test. So you'll see out of the 30 total items for vocabulary, this particular student answered all 30 of those items. So they attempted them. It doesn't mean that they necessarily got them correct. So what you'll see then is the percentile correct for your student. If you remember back in video 2, we talked about the percentile correct. Same figure that's happening here. So that's going to give you a percent correct for your student. So a 50% out of the 30 means that they attempted all 30, but they got 15 out of those 30 correct. The fourth column is going to be the percentile correct for the nation. Easy way to look at that would be that's going to be the national average. And so in this case, the national average was that they got 68% of the items for that particular section correct. The final column is going to be the difference of your son or daughter to the national average. And so in this particular case, the student received a 50% correct for the vocab section of this test. The national average was 68%, meaning that's a difference of negative 18. And so your son or daughter performed 18 percentage points below the national average. The final column is going to look at the difference. And so basically that last number column is then going to be represented by this small little bar graph. And so you'll see a line that's right down the middle. That line is going to represent the national average correct. So the number of items, or the percentage of items correct that the national average received. If it's to the left of that line, it means that they got below the national average. If your son or daughter has a bar that goes to the right of this line right down the middle, it means that they scored above the national average for that particular test. So as you are using this bottom half of the form to interpret and analyze your son or daughter's scores, you can, by looking at this final column, look for those things to the left. Those might indicate areas of weakness. Those bar graphs that move over to the right could indicate potential areas of strength. Please be sure to contact your Incarnation Catholic School. If you have any questions, also feel free to rewatch this video. Go back if there's something that doesn't quite make sense and take another look at it. We hope that you find this information informative. Continue to check out our other videos to help you interpret and analyze your son or daughter's testing information. God bless and go Irish.